Does every story need conflict? What types of conflict are there? Is it all just protagonist versus antagonist? Does a hero have to save the world? Well, today I'm talking all about conflict, so let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, rights.
Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Rights. I'm your resident horror author, Kemal Onor, and today I'm talking all about conflict. So if you like this type of content, make sure to hit like, make sure to subscribe. I post videos all about writing to this channel. And remember, if you don't subscribe, the skeletons will get you.
It's true. We will.
So conflict in a narrative is the driving force. It's the obstacle that your protagonist has to overcome. It's the thing preventing him or her from achieving their goal. And conflict can be, typically it's one of two types. You have external conflict as well as internal conflict. We'll start off with external conflict. So external conflict might be me trying to get my ex-girlfriend back. She left too soon. Sheila. I'm okay. I have my skeletons.
He was not okay.
So external conflict is the type of conflict that occurs on the outside. It's something that you can see, something you can touch. It might be the world is in danger and the only one who can save it is Captain Planet. Captain Planet, he's a hero. And so the other type of conflict that we have is internal conflict. Now, internal conflict is going to be, that's right, you guessed it, on the inside. So an internal conflict might be a character struggling with an identity crisis, similar to the time that I thought that I was secretly a pumpkin. It's a character possibly struggling with his or her moral compass, trying to make sense of the world. It's a lot of internal thoughts and a character trying to figure out who they are, a character trying to figure out where their place in the world might be. And these are all internal conflicts because they are occurring inside of a character as opposed to external conflicts, which are going to be on the exterior. The world is in danger and we have to go rescue the princess, or we have to go save the princess and beat the dragon. Internal conflict is, who am I? And so one of my favorite stories that really highlights internal conflict is going to be a short story by Ernest Hemingway, and it's his short story, Big Two-Hearted River. And in this story, we have a character who just goes out into the woods and goes fishing. It's a story that has only one character, so there is no antagonist. But in the story, our protagonist has returned home after witnessing the events of World War I, and he's so beaten up. And after witnessing the atrocities of World War I, he's come home and he can't make sense of the world. And so the only attempt that our protagonist has in this story to make any kind of sense of the world, to try and make some reason out of the chaos that he has witnessed, is to go out into the woods and go fishing. And we see a lot of the way that the protagonist behaves is the protagonist is trying to regiment the way that he is behaving, because again, he's trying to make sense of a very chaotic world. He's trying to make sense of all the atrocities that he has witnessed being part of World War I. And so the character goes out into the woods and he goes fishing. Now I know what you're thinking, boring, lame, but what if I told you he goes fishing with dynamite? I mean, just think about the possibilities. He doesn't, but just think about the possibilities. So in Big Two-Hearted River, the conflict is very much internal because our protagonist character is not under threat from someone attacking him. There's no dragon coming to try and eat him. There's no world that he has to save. He is merely trying to make sense of his place in the world and trying to reason with the chaos that he witnessed in World War I. And he's trying to recover his own sense of the world. He's trying to heal himself. And this conflict is very much occurring within the character. And this is a very great example of internal conflict. Internal conflict does not necessarily need to have an antagonist character because it's a character trying to reason with his or her. It's a character trying to reason with his or her moral compass, trying to make sense of the world and their place in it. And so I believe it's important to remember that stories are about characters. They're not about car chases. They're not about giant explosions. Michael Bay. So conflicts in your stories can be big or they can be small. They can be something as little as a person trying to figure out who they are. Maybe it's a person who goes on a big long journey and they're rediscovering themselves. It's a character taking a cross-country road trip because the life that they once lived feels inadequate for them. And so there's development, there's growth, and the conflict is going to drive the story. It's going to give your characters motivations to change. And this is why there are no characters who are perfectly content with their lives, because characters who are perfectly content with their lives, there is no conflict. And if there's no conflict in a story, it's not really a story. You have to have some conflict. Again, you can have characters who are perfectly content with their lives, but the story has to dictate that there's something that pushes them out of their comfort zone and forces them to change. And maybe their desire is they just want to get home. And this is what we see in Tolkien's The Hobbit. Conflict gives your characters goals, it gives them a purpose, it gives them an obstacle to overcome. And again, stories are about characters. It's not about epic journeys. It's about the way that these characters are behaving and the way that they react to the conflicts and how they overcome or perhaps even don't overcome, how they fail, and the repercussions of what happens once they've failed, once they've gone on this journey, and who they are at the end of the story needs to be different from who they were at the beginning of the story. And then just because your story starts off with one kind of conflict doesn't mean you have to stay with that same type of conflict. You don't have to start with external conflict and go, and that's all the story is. The story is just a story of external conflict, a character trying to save the world. You can shift over the course of the story, and a great example of this would be Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, where the external conflict in that story is Huck is trying to escape to freedom on a raft with an escaped slave, and they're trying to make it to freedom. They're trying to make it up north. They're trying to survive the Mississippi. And the internal conflict is Huck struggling with his own, we see Huck struggling with his sense of what civilization means and what the world is. And this makes the story very interesting, and it makes Huckleberry Finn an intriguing character because we see his thought process, we see his own struggle with understanding what civilization means, and several times throughout the story he misspells the word civilization. And so there's a lot that you can play around with conflict, but if your story has no conflict, you don't really have a story. You can't have a story of just a character sitting in a bathtub thinking about life. The other thing that adding that conflict is going to add to your story is it's going to add risk. It's going to add some tension. It's going to add repercussions for the actions of these characters. Does your character succeed? Does your character overcome this obstacle? What happens if he or she fails? Is the world at stake? Will the world fall into darkness? If they fail, will the crystals shatter and there's no more magic across the land? And so you have to think about your stories as conflict being the lifeblood of the stories, because conflict is going to give motivation. It's going to give your characters a path to walk on. It's going to give them a focus. And so hopefully you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little short, but I feel that talking about conflict is something that is very important, and I will be doing another video where I go a little deeper into this idea of conflict and action within a story a little later on. But again, hopefully you found this video useful, Make sure to hit like, subscribe, and as always, keep it spooky. And of course, here's your writing prompt for sticking all the way through the end. He looked at the box, unsure of what to make of it. All he could think of was blank. So set your timer and start writing. Thank you so much.
We will kick you if you don't subscribe.